Hello everyone, in this video we are going to study the structures passing through the foramens in the base of the skull. Yes, in the previous lecture we have studied the structures which are attached to the base of the skull. Here we will start with the incisive foramen and proceed in the posterior direction. First we will see where this incisive foramen is present. As you can see the base of the skull here, and this is the anterior part of the base of the skull behind the incisor. As you can see, behind the incisor here you have the foramen, which is known as incisive foramen. And what does this structure transmit? Let me show you. This transmits terminal part of greater palatine vessels. Let me show you from where this greater palatine vessels emerge, that it transmits its terminal part in the incisive foramen. See here. Here we have the greater palatine foramen. As you can see on the screen, this is the structure marked in circle is greater palatine foramen. Can you see this part? This is greater palatine foramen. From here we have both the vessels, artery and vein, which emerge from greater palatine foramen, and it travel in forward direction like this. Can you see how it traveled to forward direction and inserted inside the incisive foramen? Okay, let me show you the same thing, same structure. Here we have the incisive. This is the greater palatine vessel. Let me show you the same thing in another view. We will take the skull and we will cut the skull from a sagittal plane and look inside. How does the structure look? Let me show you. Here we take the skull. Can you see this section? And here you can see the greater palatine foramen, and here you can easily appreciate the blood vessel. Here only I have only shown here this artery so that you can clearly see how the greater palatine vessel or artery is coming here from here, and it is going inside like this. Let me show you. This is the structure. Yes. Can you see how it entered inside the foramen? Okay. So now we will talk about another structure which passes through this incisive foramen. The another structure which passes through incisive foramen terminal part of nasopalatine nerve. Okay, I will show you where this nasopalatine nerve starts, originate and insert itself. From nose to palate, please see the direction from nose to palate. It is opposite to the direction of greater palatine vessel, opposite to that. Okay, that greater palatine vessel was entering from palate side towards the nose, and while this is opposite to that, from nose to palate. Let me show you. Here, this is the main structure. Let me show you in this diagram. Can you appreciate the nasopalatine nerve in yellow? Let me outline that in black also. Yes, this is the nasopalatine nerve, and can you see how is it entering the incisive foramen from nose side and towards and going towards the palate? Okay, this is the nasopalatine nerve. Fine. And this nasopalatine nerve originate from a ganglion cone called pterygopalatine ganglion. Let me show you that ganglion. Where is that ganglion? You must have heard about pterygopalatine fossa. What is pterygopalatine fossa? See, on the posterior side or towards this side, towards the posterior side, we have the pterygoid plate of sphenoid bone, and anteriorly we have palatine bone. So the fossa formed between the palatine bone and pterygoid process is known as a pterygopalatine fossa, and the ganglion present in that fossa is known as a pterygopalatine ganglion. I think everything is clear. Let me show you where this is present. Can you appreciate it here? Yes, here on the anterior side we have palate, and on the posterior side we have pterygoid plate, and this fossa is present between them. And here we have the ganglion from which many nerve originate. Can you see the different nerves here? So Here we discussed about the structures passing through incisive foramen. Now we will study the greater palatine foramen. Yes, this greater palatine foramen transmits, let me show you the greater palatine foramen here, as we discussed just now where this is present. Can you see here? This is present here at this point. Okay. And the structure, can you see the how the blood vessels coming out from greater palatine foramen and moving in the anterior direction? What are these blood vessels? These are known as greater palatine vessel. These are known as greater palatine vessel. Okay. And here this greater palatine vessels consist of both greater palatine artery as well as vein. And here we have anterior palatine nerve. Can you appreciate the yellow part, the anterior palatine nerve? This is anterior palatine nerve. So we can see the vessel and nerve which emerges from greater palatine foramen and proceeding in forward direction. Fine. Yes, I have outlined this anterior palatine nerve with green color so that you can appreciate it clearly. Now we have another foramen which is present posterior to greater palatine foramen, known as a lesser palatine foramen. Known as lesser palatine foramen. Let me show you that structure. Here we have third foramen which we have to study is lesser palatine foramen. So this lesser palatine foramina, this transmits middle and posterior palatine nerve. Middle and posterior palatine nerve. Let me show you in the diagram where this nerve is present. Can you see the image here? Here you can see the pterygopalatine ganglion, and from pterygopalatine ganglion you can clearly appreciate the fibers which is coming down. See, the both middle and posterior palatine nerve is together known as lesser palatine nerve, as they comes out from lesser palatine foramen, called together called as lesser palatine nerve. And this lesser palatine nerve, as you can see here, this circled part here, this is known as pterygopalatine ganglion, and from here we have the structures passing inferiorly. Can you see this part? This is known as middle posterior nerve, which is supplying to uvula. Okay, and posterior to this we have, this is middle palatine nerve, and posterior to this one, this green one is known as posterior palatine nerve. Can you see the posterior palatine nerve? Yes. What is the function? See, the function to convey general sensation. Which type of sensation? Sensory. This is sensory function. See, both the type of fiber is present here. Sensory fiber also, motor fiber also. So the sensory fiber obviously conveys the general sensation from mucosa of soft palate and uvula, soft palate and uvula, and palatine tonsil, even palatine tonsil also, to the brain or central nervous system. And what is the motor function or parasympathetic function? So here, while the parasympathetic supply to mucosal gland of same territory, yes, so it supplies sensory nerve also, as well as the parasympathetic supply is also present to the mucosal gland of this same territory. Okay. So here we discussed about the lesser palatine foramen. And now we have the palatino-vaginal canal. Let me show you the structures. Okay, you can take the screenshot of this lesser palatine foramen and then we will proceed further. Fine. So I think you have taken the screenshot. Now we will see the palatino-vaginal canal. Let me show you where this vaginal canal is present. Although I have explained you, this palatino-vaginal canal is present between the vaginal process of sphenoid bone and the palatine bone. So there between them we have canal. Let me show you where the canal is present in this skull. I have explained about this in the middle part of the norma basalis, but here again I will explain you. Let me show you in this animation. Can you see the pterygopalatine fossa here? This is known as pterygopalatine fossa. Okay? And let me show you where this canal is present. I have removed the maxilla so that we can enter inside and we can see that vaginal process also. This is the palatine bone, and let me remove the palatine bone also, because then only we can see the vaginal process, and here we can appreciate the vaginal process. Here, let me go inside more. Can you see the pterygopalatine ganglion? This is a pterygopalatine ganglion, and here let me outline the nerve. See the nerve, this nerve which is going inside, and this is the vaginal process of the sphenoid bone, and the palate is present here like this. The horizontal part, horizontal process of the palatine bone is present like this. Okay, and the canal which is formed is known as palatino-vaginal canal. Okay, and here we have the nerve known as the pharyngeal branch of pterygopalatine ganglion. Let me write it down. This is the, can you see the pharyngeal branch of pterygopalatine ganglion? This is pterygopalatine ganglion, and this green part is the pharyngeal branch of pterygopalatine ganglion, which is going inside the palatino-vaginal canal. Here I have removed the palate so that you can clearly see the vaginal process of this sphenoid bone. This is the pharyngeal branch of pterygopalatine ganglion. Okay, this is the ganglion part, and here this is the vaginal process of sphenoid bone. I think everything is clear in this animation. Fine. Let me show you some more structures like the blood vessels which is passing through the palatino-vaginal canal. Again, we can see the vaginal process and the blood vessels which is going through that. Can you see, can you appreciate this part? Here, this part, this obviously it is little darker here. Why? Because we are going more inside. We have the vaginal process, and can you see the pharyngeal branch of maxillary artery? Maxillary artery comes out from external carotid artery. External carotid artery gives branch maxillary artery. Then from maxillary artery we have a branch known as pharyngeal branch of maxillary artery, which is going inside this canal. Let me outline that part. This is known as the pharyngeal branch of maxillary artery, which is passing through palatino-vaginal canal. Am I clear? So we have both the structure. You can take the screenshot of this also, palatino-vaginal canal, which transmits the pharyngeal branch of the pterygopalatine ganglion. And talking about artery, this was the nerve supply, and talking about artery, we have the pharyngeal branch of maxillary artery. You can take the screenshot of that also. This screenshot will help you understand or learn while revising, and it will make the revision a bit faster for you. Okay, because you can actually imagine the things which are present here. Fine. Now we will see the structure known as foramen ovale. Yes, there are different structures which passes through foramen ovale. This foramen transmits male. Obviously, it won't transfer any male, but yes, this is the way we remember these structure. M for mandibular nerve, which is the fifth nerve, and it is the third branch of the fifth nerve. And then A is the accessory meningeal artery. We will see about every structure in detail. And L is the lesser petrosal nerve, and E is the emissary vein, and it connects the cavernous sinus with pterygoid plexus. Pterygoid plexus is present in the pterygopalatine fossa, while the cavernous sinus is present lateral to sphenoid bone. Lateral to sella turcica, we have the cavernous sinus. So emissary vein connects the cranial fossa with the pterygoid plexus, not pterygopalatine. This is the pterygoid plexus which is present in pterygopalatine fossa. Fine. Let me show you those structure, but before that, this we have to know that occasionally anterior trunk of middle meningeal vein is also present here. Okay. Sometimes we can see the middle meningeal vein also is present. Sometimes, not always, but yes, this structure MALE, that is mandibular nerve, accessory meningeal artery, lesser petrosal nerve, and emissary vein are mostly present. Okay, let me show you in animation where is the foramen ovale and what are the structures passing through the foramen ovale. Although we have studied the foramen ovale is the part of the sphenoid bone, let me show you the sphenoid bone. Can you appreciate the sphenoid bone here? And can you appreciate the foramen ovale? Now, first we will study the artery passing through the foramen ovale. Can you see the external carotid artery? This is external carotid artery which I have marked in white. Okay. Let me see the branches. Let me show you these branches. Can you see this is the maxillary artery which is branched from external carotid artery. This is the external carotid artery. This is internal carotid artery. This external carotid artery is branching out now. See here. And this is the maxillary artery. And from this maxillary artery, we have the middle meningeal artery. Can you see the middle meningeal artery? Yes, this is the middle meningeal artery, this last one. And from this middle meningeal artery, we have accessory branch. Can you see the accessory branch? Last one, accessory branch, which is entering inside the foramen ovale. Yes. So here we can see the blood, the artery which is ultimately going inside the foramen ovale. This will help you imagine the things, how the things are going inside. Okay. Anatomy can only be learned by imagining the things, and you can only imagine if you see them, and after seeing them, apply it in your dissection hall. See there, go and find out the structure, then only you can have a master on this subject. This is the external carotid. Here we have the maxillary artery. After writing or after naming, you can just take the screenshot. This is the middle meningeal artery, and you can, while revision also, you can use my screenshot. This is the accessory branch of middle meningeal artery. Okay, so you can see all the structures here. You can take the screenshot, the artery which is passing through foramen ovale. We are discussing about the foramen ovale. Fine. So I think you took the screenshot. I have also changed this topic. We will discuss the vein. Let me show you the vein which is passing through this. Can you see the vein? The plexus? Yes, the emissary vein. See, on the inferior side, we are seeing the inferior side. Inferior side, we can see the plexus. This is known as pterygoid plexus. And on that side, on opposite side or towards the cranial fossa side, we have cavernous sinus. And both this pterygoid plexus and on that side, the cavernous sinus are connected by the emissary vein, which is connecting this plexus on this side, and towards the opposite side, we have cavernous sinus. Fine. Here, this is the emissary vein which is connecting the pterygoid plexus and the cavernous sinus. Let me show you the nerve also. What are the nerves which passes through this structure? We can clearly appreciate the mandibular nerve and the lesser petrosal nerve. Can you see? Here you can clearly appreciate this is the mandibular nerve. Mandibular nerve. Can you see? Yes. And here can you see a ganglion known as otic ganglion or otic ganglion. And from that otic ganglion, this otic ganglion, the fiber to this otic ganglion is supplied by which nerve? Lesser petrosal nerve. And what is lesser petrosal nerve? From where it originates, everything we are going to study in a separate video. But here you know this is the mandibular nerve, and on the inferior side you can see the otic ganglion, and the fiber to otic ganglion is supplied by lesser petrosal nerve. Can you see, appreciate the lesser petrosal nerve here? This lesser petrosal nerve is providing the fiber to this otic ganglion. Okay, so lesser petrosal nerve is also passing through this foramen ovale. Am I clear? So you can take the screenshot of the nerve supply also, or nerve which is passing through this foramen. and this otic ganglion receives fiber from which nerve? Lesser petrosal nerve. Am I clear? Now let's proceed further. So we discussed about these structure here. So we will talk about the carotid canal. This carotid canal transmits internal carotid artery and sympathetic plexus along with that artery and the venous plexus. Let me show you. Can you see the internal carotid artery here? This is the internal carotid artery, sorry, internal carotid canal. Okay, through which this carotid artery is going inside and from another side it will come out. Okay, this carotid canal, this transmits internal carotid artery. Second number, we have the sympathetic plexus. Can you see the nerve plexus which is surrounding the carotid artery is also present and which is also going towards going through this carotid canal, and this carotid canal is present where? On the inferior part of the petrous temporal bone. Petrous part of temporal bone is clearly seen, which is wedged between sphenoid and the occipital bone, and here we have the canal. Okay, this is the sympathetic plexus along with this fiber. Okay, and then we have the venous plexus also. I have not actually shown you the venous plexus, but yes, venous plexus is also present. Let me show you. Let me show you the sympathetic plexus. What is sympathetic plexus and from where that sympathetic plexus comes, which is surrounding the internal carotid artery. As you can see, the internal carotid artery here. This is internal carotid artery, and here on both everywhere you can see the plexus of nerve. We will discuss about that structure. Sympathetic plexus around carotid artery. From where does that come? Let me show you. This is the carotid artery. Please consider it as a carotid artery. Let me show you the structure of this is the pons, medulla oblongata and spinal cord, and here at T1, T2 level we have fiber. This is the preganglionic sympathetic fiber. Yes, obviously the motor nerve, it can be sympathetic or it can be parasympathetic, and it is the sympathetic nerve, and sympathetic nerve or parasympathetic nerve have both preganglionic and postganglionic fiber. The preganglionic, that is the nerve fiber which is present before ganglion, and postganglionic is the nerve fiber which is present after the ganglion. Now this is the preganglionic fiber or preganglionic sympathetic fiber. As you can see on the screen, this is the preganglionic sympathetic fiber which is coming out from the T1, T2 level of the spinal cord, and here you can see the superior cervical ganglion. Can you see? And this whole structure is known as sympathetic cervical chain. This whole structure is known as sympathetic cervical chain, and the upper one is known as, this is known as superior cervical ganglion. Yes or no? Yes. And this whole structure is known as sympathetic cervical chain. And you can see clearly how this preganglionic sympathetic fiber comes and enter the superior cervical ganglion, and there you can see the ganglion. Now till here it was preganglionic structure, and from the nerve fiber which will originate from here will be known as the postganglionic sympathetic fiber. Can you see the postganglionic, and how is it forming the plexus around the carotid artery? Can you now imagine from where that plexus of nerve comes? Yes, here, this some fiber from the sympathetic plexus. Out of this fiber, some fiber from the sympathetic plexus approach pterygoid canal. Yes, some fiber comes out from this and they approach the pterygoid canal, and that fiber is known as deep petrosal nerve. That fiber is known as deep petrosal nerve. So what is deep petrosal nerve here? The fiber, the postganglionic fiber or postganglionic sympathetic fiber which is surrounding the carotid artery. Some fibers comes out from those these plexus and enter inside the pterygoid canal, and that fiber which comes out from here is known as a deep petrosal nerve. I will explain you how that deep petrosal nerve goes and meets with greater palatine nerve, and not greater palatine, greater petrosal nerve, and form Vidian nerve. Okay, but here we can just appreciate the deep petrosal nerve. Okay, now here this is the deep petrosal. So you can take the screenshot of this structure also. Then we can proceed further. I think a screenshot has been taken. Now I will discuss the foramen lacerum. This is the foramen. Let me show you the foramen lacerum, which can be seen from the basal view. Can you appreciate the foramen present here? This is known as foramen lacerum. You know, it is not actually the foramen. It is the space which has been created because the bone has not locked itself. See, it is a type of a joint it has been formed here. The bones have not been in very close proximity, and that is the reason we have a space here, and that space is known as foramen lacerum here. Let me show you this. Can you see? This is the foramen lacerum. See, not much structure passes through this foramen lacerum, but here we will discuss how the structures moves from foramen lacerum through the foramen lacerum. Can you see the sympathetic plexus of the nerve which we discussed just now? And can you see the upper part? This is the structure which I am underlining is known as greater petrosal nerve. That is greater petrosal nerve. And this greater petrosal nerve, and on the downside or inferior side, you can see this is the greater petrosal nerve, and on the this is known as a geniculate ganglion, which is present in the middle ear. So geniculate ganglion, we have greater petrosal nerve, and here we have the sympathetic plexus of nerve, and this gives origin to a fiber which is known as a deep petrosal nerve. And you can see the greater petrosal nerve and a deep petrosal nerve, they are meeting and forming a nerve. Can you see this? A nerve. This is known as deep petrosal nerve. These are the fibers which has come out from the sympathetic plexus of the nerve surrounding the carotid artery. And can you see the nerve which are formed by the joining of the greater petrosal and the deep petrosal is known as, can you see the pterygopalatine canal through which this nerve is going? Yes, this is known as Vidian nerve or nerve of pterygoid canal. Can you see? This is the nerve of pterygoid canal. So here we discussed about the structures which is, see, we won't see any structure, much structure which is passing across this foramen. But yes, we have two blood vessels which we can see which is passing through this foramen. Nerve are not passing. Actually, this part, this foramen on the inferior side are covered by cartilage. Okay, but yes, still we have the structure which is passing, only small two structure, not very. Can you see this part? One artery and one vein is passing through this. What is the name of that artery? Meningeal branch of ascending pharyngeal artery. This artery is known as meningeal branch of ascending pharyngeal artery, and the vein is known as just emissary vein. Okay, so we can see the structure which is passing across this foramen, and some of the structure are passing through this foramen, but across this foramen only two structures are present: the meningeal branch of ascending pharyngeal artery, and the second is emissary vein. Am I clear? So you can take the screenshot of this structure, the foramen lacerum. What are the structures present here? See, I have not marked the carotid artery. You can appreciate the carotid artery. This is the, actually this is the petrous part of the temporal bone which has been faded here to show you the direction or the pathway of the carotid artery. Can you see it is entering the this internal carotid artery which is entering inside this canal, carotid canal, and it is moving in anterior direction, and again it is going inside towards the cranial fossa. Okay, so here we discussed about this structure. Now we will study the petrotympanic fissure. What is petrotympanic fissure? A fissure formed by the petrous part of the temporal bone and the tympanic part of the temporal bone. The fissure which is formed is known as petrotympanic fissure. Okay, let me show you. Here, can you appreciate the blue part? Yes, that is a petrotympanic fissure. This is the petrous part. From this side we have the petrous part, and here the tympanic part. So that is known as petrotympanic fissure. This part. And let me show you the structures. Can you see the chorda tympani? Yes, this is the chorda tympani nerve, which is the branch of which nerve? Facial nerve. This is the chorda tympani. Yes, you can clearly see here. This is the chorda tympani, which is the branch of which nerve? The facial nerve. And here you have the artery known as anterior tympanic artery. And from where it has been branched? It has been branched from maxillary artery. It is also branched from the maxillary artery. And from where the maxillary artery came? External carotid artery. So everything is clear till here. Okay. So we discussed about this petrotympanic fissure also. Okay. You can take the screenshot of this structure and then we can proceed further. Now we have, let me show you actually how these structures are attached inside. Let me fade this part of the bone. Can you see the petrotympanic fissure? Yes, let me fade this part of the bone so that you can peep inside the middle cranial, middle ear cavity or tympanic cavity. Can you see the middle ear part? Yes, malleus, incus, stapes part. See how beautifully the structure is arranged here. And here you have, this is the chorda tympani. And can you appreciate this part? This is the facial nerve which has given this branch known as chorda tympani. Foramen magnum. See, we won't go in much detail about the animation part. We will just know the structures which are passing through foramen magnum and some pictures which will make the concept clear. Please see here, this is the foramen magnum, and we know that if when you look at the foramen magnum from inferior view, anteriorly it is little narrow and posteriorly it is broad. So what are the structure which are present in foramen magnum will be dealt here. See here, this is the narrow part. This is the narrow anterior part of foramen magnum, and the structure which is present here is the apical ligament of Dens is attached here. Can you see? Appreciate? Yes, this is the apical ligament of the Dens. And then we have posterior to that, we have the vertical band of cruciate ligament in green, and then posterior to that we have the membrana tectoria. Yes, these are attached to this and it goes longitudinally downward. So these are the ligaments which are attached to the narrow anterior part. Now we will see the part in the structure which is passing through the broader part. This is the broader part or wider posterior part, and here this contains the lowest part of medulla oblongata. Second, the three meninges which is present here. Obviously, you know the meninges, the dura mater, the arachnoid, the pia mater, all should be present here. So everything is very simple. This is known as dura mater. Then we have the arachnoid and the pia mater, and inside pia mater we will have the spinal cord. Can you see the spinal cord? This is the cut section. This is the cut section. And we have the central canal. This is the arachnoid part and this is the pia mater. So we can see a subarachnoid space. Here we have the subarachnoid space. Sub means which is inside that. Okay. This subarachnoid space has a number of structure passing through them. You can appreciate here, this is the anterior spinal artery, which is the part of vertebral artery. And here we have the posterior spinal artery on both the side, and here you can see the vertebral artery on both the side. Let me mark that also. This is the vertebral artery. So you can see the structure passing through subarachnoid space of foramen magnum, largest foramen. And here you can see in green, that is the nerve. What is the nerve called? That nerve is known as spinal root of accessory nerve. Spinal root of which nerve? Accessory nerve. Yes. So here we discuss the structures passing through this foramen, that is foramen magnum. You can take the screenshot of whole this note so that we can proceed further. I think everything is clear. There should not be any much doubt, and if you have any doubt, you can write in the comment section. Let me show you in the picture here. Can you appreciate this part? This is the view which you can see here. You can clearly appreciate the posterior spinal artery. This. You can see the posterior spinal artery and anterior spinal. Posterior spinal artery is present on the posterior side and anterior spinal artery. And can you appreciate the vertebral artery, which is from where this anterior spinal and posterior spinal artery is arising, and from where the vertebral artery arises? From the subclavian artery. Yes or no? Yes. From subclavian artery, you can clearly see the vertebral artery which is coming from here. Okay. Here you can see the hypoglossal or anterior condylar canal. Although we can see the foramen, we can't see the canal here, but yes, obviously the canal has foramen. This is known as hypoglossal or anterior condylar canal. Can you see in the circle here? Yes, the red circle which is present here. This is the condyle part, and here we have the hypoglossal or anterior condylar canal. This hypoglossal or anterior condylar canal transmits the hypoglossal nerve. We will see them in animation also. And the second is the meningeal branch of ascending pharyngeal artery. The meningeal branch of ascending pharyngeal artery. And C, emissary vein. And what is the function of emissary vein here? To connect the sigmoid sinus with jugular vein. It connects the sigmoid sinus, which is present intracranially or towards the cranial fossa side, and the jugular vein, which is present outside, and jugular vein. So this is the structures which we can see in through the hypoglossal foramen or hypoglossal canal. We will see about them in animation also. Have taken the screenshot. So can you appreciate the nerve which is passing or coming out from here? This is the hypoglossal canal, and from here the nerve is coming out. What is the name of the nerve? This is the hypoglossal nerve. Hypoglossal nerve. We will discuss about the artery also. What are the artery? Can you see the artery which is going inside is, let me enlarge that part. Let me enlarge. Can you see very small artery which is going inside, known as hypoglossal branch of neuromeningeal trunk. This is the hypoglossal branch of neuromeningeal trunk. Branch of neuromeningeal trunk. Then where is the neuromeningeal trunk? Here we have the neuromeningeal trunk from where this artery arises. The neuromeningeal trunk comes out from which artery? Ascending pharyngeal artery. And from where this ascending pharyngeal artery? This ascending pharyngeal artery comes from the external carotid artery. Let me show you all that structure. So we have discussed the ascending pharyngeal artery as well as external carotid artery. Let me show you the neuromeningeal trunk. Here we have the neuromeningeal. This is the hypoglossal branch of the neuromeningeal trunk, which is marked in blue here so that you can appreciate it clearly. This part. And then can you see this black part? This black part is known as the neuromeningeal trunk. This is known as neuromeningeal trunk. And when you will see, it is the part of ascending pharyngeal artery, and which is the part of external carotid artery. You can take the screenshot of this structure so that we can, oh, let me move so that you can take the screenshot. Okay, fine, everything is clear. So now we can proceed further. We will see the posterior condylar canal. We discussed about anterior condylar canal, and here we have the posterior. Can you see the condyle part here? And here we have the canal known as posterior condylar canal. What are the structures which passes through posterior condylar canal? This transmits the emissary vein. Can you see? This transmits the emissary vein. This is the posterior condylar canal. And can you see the emissary vein? This transmits the emissary vein which connects sigmoid sinus, which is present inside. I will show you in the animation where the sigmoid sinus is present, and the venous plexus, suboccipital venous plexus, that is the plexus or the net of vein which is present below the occipital. Here you have the occipital bone, and the nerve which is the vein which is present below the occipital bone is known as suboccipital venous plexus. Okay, so you can clearly appreciate the venous plexus, but you cannot see the sigmoid sinus because sigmoid sinus is present intracranially, and we will see the intracranial part after fading out this skull. Okay, here you can see the suboccipital venous plexus here. Okay, let me fade this part. Let me fade this part and show you. This has been faded here. Can you appreciate the sigmoid sinus? This is the sigmoid sinus. Yes, it is going like this. This is the sigmoid sinus, which is on one side, anterior side and lateral side, it is touching which bone? The petrous part of temporal bone, and the another side it is formed by the occipital bone. Can you see? This is the sigmoid sinus. And this emissary vein which is coming out from posterior condylar foramen, posterior condylar canal, is connecting the sigmoid sinus, which is intracranial, with the suboccipital venous plexus, which is extracranial. Okay, everywhere the function of emissary vein is like that only, to connect the intracranial venous part to the extracranial venous part. Okay, now, after dealing with the posterior condylar canal, we will discuss about the jugular foramen and the structure passing through that jugular foramen. See, actually, this is the, can you see this part? This is the jugular foramen. Yes, here you can see the jugular foramen, this one. Okay, see, this jugular foramen is divided into three parts: anterior, middle and posterior part. Let me also divide this part, and then we will study separately. Although in animation, while seeing the animation, we won't be seeing that anterior part, middle part or posterior part. We will just look in toto. Okay, but here we will discuss about them or write the note about them separately. So here we have the jugular foramen. As you can see, I have divided this jugular foramen into three parts, and here it is the anterior part, and this anterior part transmits. First is the inferior petrosal sinus. Okay, then second is the meningeal branch of ascending pharyngeal artery, and the third, only two structure passes through this. Okay, and talking about the middle part, can you see the middle part of this, which has been marked by M? This is the middle part of the jugular foramen. This middle part of the jugular foramen transmits 9th, 10th and 11th cranial nerve. You know the name of all those nerve: 9th nerve, 10th nerve and 11th cranial nerve. We will discuss about them also. We will see in animation also. And then here we left with the posterior part of the jugular foramen. Here on the posterior side we have the posterior part of the jugular foramen, and through this posterior part of the jugular foramen we have the vein which goes inside, known as internal. Posterior part transmits the first internal jugular vein, and the second is the meningeal branch of occipital artery. Meningeal branch of occipital artery. You can take the screenshot of this diagram and then we will this part and then we can proceed further. Okay, I will show you where those structures are present, how the veins are formed, everything. So just you can take the screenshot of this diagram and then we can see. So here you can see the skull part and you can clearly see the vein part, and let me show you. Let me this fade the temporal bone so that I can show you different veins, the sinuses. Can you see this part on the inner side? Here we have inferior petrosal sinus. Here, please see here. Can you see this part? This part is known as this part. Here to here, this is known as, let me show you, this part is known as inferior petrosal sinus. Can you see this here? This is the jugular foramen. This is the jugular foramen and inferior petrosal sinus is coming till here. So that is the reason it is called anterior part of the jugular foramen. We have inferior petrosal sinus. Okay. This is known as inferior petrosal sinus. Okay. I think that is clear. You can imagine that sinus, although the sinus is present towards the inner side of internal inner cranial fossa. So we have just faded out this diagram so that we can appreciate this part. We have faded out which bone? The temporal bone. Okay. Can you see here? Now let me show you the artery also, which artery goes from it. Can you see the meningeal branch? Let me show you. This is the meningeal branch. This is the meningeal branch of occipital artery. And occipital artery, you know that it is a part of external carotid artery. And here we have internal jugular vein. Can you see the internal jugular vein here? Yes, this is the internal jugular vein which is going inside. Let me show you this part here. You can appreciate here internal jugular vein also here, and here we have the, which is this blood vessel is known as, which is going towards the jugular foramen. Okay, here you can appreciate. Can you see the jugular foramen part? This is the jugular foramen part. See, we need little imagination. We can see here. Yeah. Now you can see only the blood vessel part, known as the meningeal branch of occipital artery. Okay. And here we have one more blood vessel known as posterior meningeal artery. Can you see? Ascending branch. Now we will deal about the nerve which is passing through this foramen. Can you see this part? Yes. 3 nerves are there. This is known as the glossopharyngeal nerve, the 9 number. Then we have the vagus nerve, the 10 number, and we have the accessory nerve, which is the 11 number. So 9, 10, 11 number nerve passes through this foramen. I have removed the other structure, the jugular vein, the artery which is passing through this foramen. Why? Because you won't be able to appreciate properly the other structure, the nerve. So we discussed about all the structure which is passing through this foramen one by one. First we discussed about the artery, the vein, and then the nerve. So I think everything is clear till here. Okay. Now we will talk about the structure which is passing through this here. The jugular foramen has a canaliculus. This is the opening of mastoid canaliculus. Can you see the opening of mastoid canaliculus? This is the jugular foramen, and it is the lateral wall of jugular foramen where there is the opening of mastoid canaliculus. This is also known as Arnold canal, and it is present in a lateral wall of jugular fossa. Yes or no? Here you have the jugular fossa which you can see, and in the lateral wall of jugular fossa we have the mastoid canaliculus. Fine. And here this transmits. I will show you the structure which is transmitted. This transmits the blood vessel. See, this is known as the auricular branch of vagus nerve. Not the blood vessel, the nerve. This transmits the auricular branch of vagus nerve, that is 10th cranial nerve. I will show you here in the animation. First take the screenshot of this and then we will go in the animation part. See, can you appreciate this part here? Can you see this part here? This part, yes. This is the auricular branch of which nerve? Vagus nerve. See, I have faded this temporal bone to show you the pathway of this nerve. Can you appreciate now? Here, can you appreciate this part? This is the mastoid canaliculus. Can you see this part? Mastoid canaliculus. This is the jugular fossa. This is known as jugular fossa. And this is the lateral wall of jugular fossa through which this auricular branch is going inside. Auricular branch of which nerve? Vagus nerve. Let me show you the vagus nerve part from where it has been arisen. See here. Can you see this part? Yes. And we have one more canal which is present between the carotid canal and the jugular fossa. This is known as tympanic canaliculus. This is known as tympanic canaliculus. And the name suggests the tympanic. Obviously, tympanic, this canaliculus will lead to tympanic cavity or middle ear cavity. Although we have faded this structure so that we can see the inner structure. That is the reason you can see here the cochlea part. Tympanic canaliculus on the thin edge. Can you see the thin edge which is present between them? Between this jugular foramen part, jugular fossa actually, and the carotid canal on the another side. So we have one side the carotid canal and here we have the jugular foramen or jugular fossa part of the jugular foramen, and between them at edge we have the opening of canaliculus. Which canaliculus is this? This is the tympanic canaliculus. Okay. So here we have the tympanic canaliculus through which the tympanic branch of glossopharyngeal nerve passes. Can you see the glossopharyngeal nerve here? This is the glossopharyngeal nerve, and the tympanic branch of glossopharyngeal nerve is going through this canaliculus. And here we have the which nerve? This is the auricular branch of the vagus nerve. Fine. This is the auricular branch of the vagus nerve which is going through this mastoid canaliculus. Okay. This is also known as a Jacobson nerve. This is also called Jacobson nerve. Which nerve? The tympanic branch of the glossopharyngeal nerve. Okay. Now here, what is this? This is the middle ear cavity. Fine. So we discussed about the mastoid canaliculus as well as tympanic canaliculus. Now we will proceed. So here we will discuss the structures passing through the stylomastoid foramen. You can clearly see the nerve which is known as facial nerve which passes through this stylomastoid foramen. This is the facial nerve, and the artery which is present, which is passing through this foramen, is known as stylomastoid branch of posterior auricular artery. You can clearly appreciate the stylomastoid branch since it is passing through the stylomastoid foramen. So that is the reason this branch is given the name stylomastoid branch of which artery? The posterior auricular artery. So we discussed about all the structures which are passing through the foramen present in the norma basalis view. So here we complete all the series of the norma basalis. First we discussed the structures on the norma basalis, then we studied about the attachment of norma basalis, and here we studied about the structure passing through the foramens present in the norma basalis. So I hope you like the video. Just like, share and subscribe this video, and thank you for supporting us.